and later a change of protocol by the major tuna companies. In an interview at that time, Anthony O'Reilly, former CEO of Heinz, which owned StarKist, said, "I think it would be a poor CEO that was not attentive to his customers. And because of the affection that children have for Flipper, and because of the gross scenes that were shown in the Labuddy film, there was a growing barrage of criticism, well orchestrated, which I think served to convey a growing sentiment among schoolchildren that the previous fishing methods were no longer acceptable." Those schoolchildren and their parents were among the relieved shoppers when the, quote, dolphin-safe eco-label was introduced. We all felt better and resumed eating tuna. I didn't think about the tuna problem or the dolphin-safe label again for more than a decade. When I finally did, it was because I realized we had been duped. The dolphin-safe logo, introduced in 1990, was but one of the newly introduced market tools to save the world. That same year, the U.S. government established organic food legislation, although the first organic food certification was founded in Santa Cruz, California, in 1973. The Forest Stewardship Council, an international scheme, was formed in 1993 after years of discussions about how to certify forestry practices as sustainable. The Marine Stewardship Council, the main program to certify sustainable fisheries, started up in 1997, the same year that Fair Trade International was created. Many more labels followed. Until this push for certification, the goal of shaming campaigns and boycotts had been to fundamentally change entire companies or industries. Activists like Cesar Chavez, behind the strike and boycott of table grapes in the 1960s, would not have ended their efforts with a label on grapes that read, "Picked by farm workers who earned a minimum wage." The aim was not to satisfy the concerns of a few consumers, but to, among other things, change federal rules for the minimum wage and workplace safety for all farm workers. The exposure of poor sanitation in meatpacking factories in the early 20th century was not intended to produce a label that would allow concerned consumers to purchase hygienic meat. The goal was to raise sanitary standards everywhere. But by the 1980s, the notion of directly changing supply was being displaced by the idea of changing demand. At first glance, this strategy seems reasonable, particularly in a laissez-faire economy. If demand changes, supply should respond. The two are balanced on opposite sides of the ledger, as I was often reminded during my 6 years studying economics. The new plan of engagement, which even environmentalists supported because the Reagan era had ushered in a political climate that had become more and more hostile toward regulation, saw the pocketbook as the most powerful avenue of persuasion. This strategy allowed consumers to retain their freedom to choose, the battle cry of libertarian economist and free market popularizer Milton Friedman, and suggested that guilt-ridden shoppers could avoid their uneasy feelings by simply changing their buying habits. As the focus shifted from supply to demand, shame on the part of corporations began to be overshadowed by guilt on the part of consumers, as the vehicle for solving social and environmental problems. Certification became more and more popular, and its rise quietly suggested that responsibility should fall more to the individual consumer rather than to political society. The notion of certification also disposed of shame and targeted guilt as the main form of engagement. Guilt could be used to motivate individuals in a way that it could not be used for entire industries or suppliers. But it could also be used only on individuals, since groups, such as the tuna fishing industry, lack a conscience and therefore cannot feel guilty. The goal became not to reform entire industries, but to alleviate the consciences of a certain sector of consumers. But the problems of pesticide use and worker exploitation and bottom trawling cannot be solved with an individual choice. If pesticides are absent from my food, but they are in everybody else's, they still leach into our shared water supply. If I eat dolphin-safe tuna, but everybody else continues to eat dolphin-unsafe tuna, dolphins remain in trouble. If I stop flying, but nobody else does, carbon dioxide emissions continue to steeply increase. The trouble with